Welcome to my bathhouse. You found your way to another long, quiet story, one that drifts backward through time, far from the noise of now. Tonight, we slip into the ancient world, steam rising, sandals echoing on marble, and the scent of spiced oil lingering in the air. You're about to enter a place that was once the height of civilization's comfort. A Roman bathhouse may sound like a luxury: warm water, tiled halls, a bit of oil and conversation. But what if you worked there, or were a regular visitor who couldn't afford the fancy bits? What if you had to scrub the stone floors with no soap, no gloves, and no dignity? What if your job was to oil down strangers? Tonight's story is a slow, winding walk through that world, a quiet journey through heat and whispers, gossip and grime. You don't have to remember it all. Let the rhythm of the words carry you. If you drift off, that's perfectly fine. If you stay with me a while longer, we'll begin just behind the bathhouse doors. Imagine yourself waking in the grayish hush before sunrise. Your room is small, shared with two others. The walls are rough stone, and you've been dreaming of smoke again. Wood smoke, thick with resin, because you've spent too long near the furnace lately. Your breath clouds the air, not because it's cold outside, but because inside, where the fire still flickers below the caldarium, the hot room, moisture clings to everything. Your tunic is never quite dry. You shuffle into sandals stiff with yesterday's sweat, wrap a cloth around your hair, and descend. Down, past the pale torchlight of the main corridor, where clay lamps hiss faintly as they burn. You've been assigned to the bathing floor today. Your first task is predictable: scrape the old oil. Each day, bathers rub themselves down with scented olive oil, then scrape it off with a strigil, a curved bronze blade shaped like a crescent moon. The mixture of sweat, dirt, and oil, called strigilus crudus, is left in piles or smeared on benches. It reeks, slightly sweet, slightly sour. Your rag is old, your fingers are raw. You kneel at the marble bench and begin to wipe, then scrape. The stone beneath your knees is warm from the hypocaust below, the underfloor furnace that heats this entire place. The heat seeps upward. By the second hour, your tunic clings. The air is thick, not hot exactly, but oppressive. You're used to it. You know how to breathe slowly, just through your nose. The furnace slaves have it worse, you remind yourself. They tend the fires without breaks. By mid-morning, the bathhouse begins to fill. Not just senators and patricians. Today it's a mixed crowd. Freedmen, craftsmen, a few soldiers. Some bring their own oil flasks. Others pay for yours, though few tip. One woman glares when you splash too much water on her sandals. A boy laughs as you dodge the blow of a grumpy baker who insists the tepidarium is too cold. Still, there's rhythm. Scrape, pour, rinse, sweep, wipe again. Heat radiates upward. The mosaics shimmer faintly with condensation. Someone drops a copper coin into your hand and calls it a donation to Mercury. You pocket it anyway. In the afternoon, you're assigned to the caldarium, where the real heat lives. You slide open the thick wooden door and the wave hits you, hot as a forge with no breeze. Steam blurs the outlines of figures seated on benches. Some lie prone, dabbing themselves with cloths soaked in rosewater. Here, the air is wet and metallic. You must ladle water onto the stone to keep it steamy. Each splash echoes like a sigh. You carry the bucket slowly. Muscles ache. A slave next to you collapses for a moment, then blinks and carries on. Nobody says a word. The stone floor is slick beneath your feet. You focus on your steps. Later, you return to the appetiterium, the changing room. A soldier has lost his sandal and accuses a merchant of theft. You are told to find it. You crawl under benches, through discarded tunics and damp towels, and discover it in a corner, gnawed by a rat. The soldier laughs and walks away barefoot. Your shift ends as the sun dips. You are damp, exhausted, and smell faintly of old oil, cedar, and wet wool. You don't bathe. There's no time. You simply scrape what you can off your arms and wrap yourself in a spare cloth. You think, tomorrow might be better. Maybe you'll be assigned to the cold pool. Maybe. But you know the truth. The rhythm will remain. The baths are eternal. And you are just one more hand in the steam. Let's linger now, just a little longer inside the stone walls of the Roman bathhouse. But this time, we turn our attention to a quieter figure. A man who rarely raised his voice, but was always listening. Gaius Tullius Quintilianus was his full name, though in whispered conversation most simply called him the Silencer. Not because he was violent, he wasn't. Not because he was mysterious, though he was that, too. No. He earned his nickname because of how he moved through spaces like the tepidarium, the warm room of the baths, never speaking unless spoken to, and never revealing what he knew. And he knew a great deal. Gaius wasn't a nobleman, but he wasn't poor either. He was a libertus, a freedman, who had once served in the household of a minor senator known for dull speeches and scandalous house parties. Upon gaining his freedom, Gaius had done what many clever, careful men in Rome did. He found a profession built on discretion. He became a private secretary, a letter copyist, a keeper of confidences. But what made Gaius different was not his skill with ink and wax, or his perfect memory for dictation. It was his habit of visiting the same bathhouse every day at the same hour, slipping into the warm, drowsy calm of the tepidarium, and sitting silently for nearly an hour. Not to gossip, not to boast, to listen. He became a fixture, a quiet shadow among the soap bubbles and steam. Senators, merchants, even tribunes learned to glance sideways before speaking too freely, for fear that Gaius might be nearby. He wore a plain woolen tunic, never showed wealth, and never answered personal questions. But when he was asked to draft a speech, or a letter of persuasion, or even a subtle blackmail note, it was always perfectly phrased. Until one day, Gaius Tullius Quintilianus was found dead. There was no public outcry, no statue raised, just a passing remark by one praetor that Rome-ass letters would now be a little less clever. The body had been found in the tepidarium, beneath a towel bench, arms folded, eyes closed. For a moment the bath attendants thought he was asleep, but he was not. There were no visible wounds, no sign of poison, just stillness. The coroner said quietly that it may have been heat stroke or fainting from hunger. Gaius had always been thin, but others were less sure, and here we slip further into that ancient fog of rumor. Because in the weeks leading up to his death, Gaius had taken on a peculiar commission. A noblewoman, wealthy, widowed, discreet, had asked him to review a batch of old family letters. She believed something had been hidden in them, not treasure, but a confession, a truth buried in euphemism and calligraphy. She thought her late husband's brother may have been plotting against her estate. Gaius agreed, and in the days that followed, he was seen frowning, just slightly, at scrolls even during his bath. He had broken his rule. He had started bringing parchment to the tepidarium. The day before his death, he was overheard muttering a line, over and over again. In the warmth, all ink runs. Was it a code? Was it frustration? Or was it nothing at all? No one could say. But after his passing, the noblewoman vanished from Rome. Her estate was sold. And the scrolls, those curious, ambiguous scrolls, were never seen again. Historians still debate whether Gaius was silenced, or simply lived too close to the silence he cultivated. But the tepidarium remembers. The steam may soften the air, but some secrets, like a faint scent of myrrh, cling to the stones. And somewhere, deep in the layered echo of whispered Latin, the silencer waits. Now let's step away from the lives and stories of the bathhouse, and begin to dig, not with our hands, but with quiet care, alongside archaeologists brushing sand from marble, tracing fingerprints across tiles, and gently lifting what the centuries have hidden. Because for all their grandeur and steam, Roman baths were not just places of cleanliness. They were places of loss. People dropped things there, forgotten in corners, slipped into drains, or deliberately hidden in stone crevices. Objects left behind tell stories that no scroll ever recorded. And even now, long after the fires have gone out and the voices have faded, we are still finding them. The first place to look is the drain. In the suspensura, the crawl space below the floors of a bathhouse where warm air once circulated through stacks of brick, archaeologists have discovered a strange assortment of items. Ivory hairpins, clay oil flasks, coins, bits of sandal leather, and even engraved gemstones. The coins were especially intriguing. Some were low-value coppers, likely fallen from the robes of the poor, but others were silver denarii, tucked under stones or pushed into cracks, possibly for luck, possibly as offerings. A scholar once joked that bath drains were the wishing wells of Rome, but deeper finds suggest something more intentional. In a bathhouse in Germania, a small bronze figurine was unearthed beneath the caldarium wall, an image of Mercury, god of travelers and thieves. Why there? Why tucked into a place no one would ever see? Was it a blessing or a warning? Elsewhere, in Ostia, just outside Rome, excavators found an entire set of surgical instruments behind a collapsed wall near the changing room. Tiny bronze scalpels, tweezers, and probes, still neatly bundled in a leather case. Were they forgotten in haste? Was their owner summoned elsewhere in an emergency? Or did someone wish to hide them? Then there are the curse tablets. In Bath, England, ancient Aquae Sulis, more than 100 thin sheets of lead have been recovered from the sacred spring near the Bath complex. Inscribed in cramped, looping Latin, they are filled with grievances. I curse the person who stole my cloak. May whoever took my bronze comb lose their sight. Names were often included, sometimes even descriptions. One particularly odd tablet, now housed in a museum, asks the goddess to punish the one with short teeth who always smells of onions. These weren't official prayers, they were personal pleas, desperate, petty, and all too human. Even stranger was the discovery of a clay doll buried under a tepidarium threshold in Pompeii. Roughly shaped, with etched eyes and no mouth. Some believe it was a child's toy. Others think it was part of a ritual, intended to absorb illness or misfortune before it crossed the threshold. The ambiguity remains. And there are the mosaics. Not just decoration, but coded storytelling. One set of tiles in Sicily appears to show a group of bathers being startled by a small animal, possibly a weasel. Some believe it's humorous, an inside joke. Others suggest it symbolizes gossip or hidden danger. So what did the baths truly hold? Warm water, certainly. But also whispers. Coins lost and never found. Wishes made and never granted. Sins washed away, and others left behind in lead and lie. To walk through the ruins today is to pass over forgotten prayers and misplaced earrings, beneath arches where steam once curled like incense. The floor may be cracked, the pools dry, but the silence there is not empty. It is full of the weight of all those small human moments, the lost things that made life whole. Now that we've traced the shadows of workers, whispers, and objects lost to time, we turn our gaze upward, toward the marbled luxury of the Roman elite. Because while you may have spent your morning scraping oil and sweat from the floors, there were others drifting languidly through corridors lined with onyx, never lifting a hand, barely raising a voice, bathing not out of necessity, but as performance. The bathhouse for the wealthy was never just a place to get clean. It was a theater of prestige. Imagine yourself now, not as a lowly attendant, but as a domina, a high-ranking Roman woman, or a patrician lord wrapped in dyed wool. You arrive late in the morning, carried by litter, servants fanning you beneath silk awnings. You don't enter through the public doors. No. There's a private entrance, guarded and perfumed. Your sandals are removed for you. A slave rubs citrus oil on your temples while another carefully adjusts your gold-flecked tunic. You do not rush. This is not a task. It is a statement. The elite often began in the apoditerium, the changing room, where the quality of your oil flask was as important as the oil inside. Glass imported from Alexandria, scents from Arabia. Your bottle might be studded with amber, your comb carved from ivory. Everything signals your place in the world. In the tepidarium, warm and drowsy, you discuss politics in soft tones. The walls are painted with frescoes, nymphs in soft blues, dolphins leaping across red ochre skies. The marble benches are heated from below. Slaves keep the heat steady. A tray of chilled figs is passed around. A small plate of oysters, too, on days when trade is good. You taste just one, cool, briny, with a hint of lemon. You don't eat to satisfy hunger. You eat to fill the silence between veiled insults. From there, the party may move to the laconicum, the dry sweat room. It is dim, save for slats of sun slicing through the high vent. Someone quotes Virgil. Someone else misquotes it. Laughter flickers, careful and rehearsed. You dab at your brow with a cloth embroidered in your family's insignia. Then, the frigidarium, the cold plunge. You do not wade in. You descend, slowly, deliberately. The water shocks the skin. That's the point. You emerge with gooseflesh, and a servant wraps you in warmed linen. It is not unusual for private bath suites to include libraries, dining rooms, even gardens. Business is done here. Marriages arranged, alliances forged. A senator may offer you a gift, a pearl brooch perhaps, while casually suggesting a vote shift in next week's forum. Later, as dusk nears, you may retire to a side chamber. Not all bathhouse activities were public. Some were indulgent. The poets make much of it. The architecture, too, with its curtained alcoves and sound-muffling fountains. Evening light glints off silver bowls filled with spiced wine. The air smells of lavender and crushed thyme. You recline on a low couch, listening to the trickle of a fountain carved in the shape of Neptune, while musicians, quiet and precise, play a tune you barely hear. And then, you leave. But not without ceremony. Your hair is combed again. A final application of perfume, perhaps rose or cinnamon. You step back into your litter, the city's sounds muffled by silk. Behind you, the baths return to stillness. Servants extinguish lamps. A worker mutters about the spilled wine. Another gathers the gold leaf wrappers from a discarded tray. In the fading heat, silence settles over the tiles once more. To be elite in Rome was not merely to enjoy the baths. It was to turn the act of bathing into a performance, every motion curated, every scent selected. You didn't just enter the bathhouse, you arrived. And you made sure the world noticed. Let us return now, not to marble columns or perfumed chambers, but below. Beneath the splendor of the Roman bathhouse lies a hidden world, hot, narrow, and utterly essential. Here, in the gloom below the floors, is the hypocaust, a word that means heat from below, a place where fire is king and air is always moving. Imagine yourself not as a bather or an attendant, but as a hypocaustum service, one of the furnace slaves who tends the fire that warms the empire's skin. Your shift begins before light touches the atrium above. You sleep near the prefernium, the fire chamber. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's always warm. The walls sweat in the dark, and the air smells of smoke, ash, and baked stone. You wake not by sunlight, but by the dull creak of a supervisor's sandals overhead, reminding you it's time to begin. You do not dress finely. You wrap a cloth around your waist and another across your mouth, though it does little to keep the ash from your lungs. You step barefoot across a floor slick with soot and begin feeding the belly of the bath. Wood first, then charcoal, then more wood. Always feeding, always fanning. The fire must stay steady, never too hot, never too cold. You can hear them above you, the bathers, footsteps pacing across the caldarium, laughter echoing through the tepidarium, water being ladled and spilled, and still you work. You crouch in narrow corridors lined with stacks of brick, called pillae, which hold the floor above. The heat rises between them, traveling through gaps to warm the rooms above. You do not see the sun, you do not see the baths. You hear them, you feel their weight. The walls around you glow orange as the fire surges. The bricks radiate heat back at your skin. You sweat constantly, your hair is damp. If you stop to rest, you lie beside the fire, not too close, not too far. Just enough to let the warmth keep your muscles soft. Occasionally there's a break, brief and hushed. You drink from a shared clay cup, eat bread that crumbles like dry ash, and then you return. The fire cannot go out, not even once, not even on Saturnalia. Sometimes you whisper prayers, not to Jupiter, but to Vulcan, the old fire god, forgotten by most but remembered here in the furnace. You offer him the cracked end of a loaf or a few drops of olive oil stolen from the kitchen, just enough to keep his temper down. There are stories, of course, of fires that grew too hot and cracked the floors above, of collapsed chambers, of forgotten boys buried in soot. You do not think about those. Instead, you listen for the rhythm, the shuffle of ash, The sigh of bellows, the soft hiss of heat licking at the bones of the bathhouse. You become part of it. The heartbeat beneath the tiles, the breath that keeps the baths alive. And when your shift ends, hours later, you do not feel clean. You are crusted in soot, your skin smudged black. But above, the bathers are glowing, refreshed. They never see your work, but they feel it in every drop of sweat, every warm bench, every perfect plunge into heat. You climb back to your cot and sleep beside the fire, not for warmth, for belonging. Because here in the Hippocaust, you are not seen, but you are essential. Let's now surface from the furnace tunnels, and once again wander into the steam-laced calm of the tepidarium. This time not through the eyes of a worker, but through the curious story of one man whose bath became a bit too relaxing. His name was Lucius Septimius Varro, a minor senator, respected but not terribly remarkable. His speeches were long, his toga always perfectly creased, and his hair oiled into a style 3 decades too old. He was known among his peers for 2 things: falling asleep in meetings, and never ever missing his daily bath. Lucius believed deeply in the power of ritual. He woke each day at dawn, offered a small libation to Fortuna, and made his way, slowly, always slowly, to the Thermae Antoninianae, one of the grandest bath complexes in Rome. He always brought the same things: a scroll of Cicero's orations, an orange, and his personal strigil made from polished horn. And always, he stayed for exactly 3 hours. Until one day, he didn't leave. The story has been passed down in fragments, an anecdote whispered in the footnotes of letters, preserved more for amusement than scandal. But here is what the sources agree on. On the 17th day of Sextilis, Lucius arrived at the baths slightly later than usual. He seemed calm, perhaps calmer than usual. He greeted his favorite oil boy with a rare nod. He even smiled, faintly, at a joke made by a neighboring bather. He passed through the caldarium, as was his routine, then settled into the tepidarium, a long chamber bathed in warm light and pale blue mosaic, its floor slightly misted with condensation, its ceiling high and domed. And there, reclining on a curved bench against a lion-headed fountain, Lucius Septimius Varro closed his eyes, and did not open them. Hours passed. The attendants began to notice. First, that his orange had rolled off the bench. Then, that his scroll had drooped, half opened. A small boy poked his toe and was hushed by his mother. Still, Lucius did not stir. Eventually, a senior attendant approached. Still no movement. He called softly, then louder. Nothing. It was assumed he had passed on. Peacefully, perhaps. An old man lulled into final sleep by warm air and routine. And so, out of respect, they summoned the magistrate, notified the Senate, and made plans for proper rites. But here's the twist. Lucius wasn't dead. He had merely entered such a profound state of sleep, possibly aided by a midday draught of poppy wine, that he could not be roused. He awoke the following evening, thoroughly confused, having apparently slept for more than 20 hours. The city had begun preparations for his funeral. His household had begun dividing his estate. His nephew had already taken his favored chair. Lucius returned home groggily, asked for a honey cake, and commented that the bathhouse seemed unusually quiet today. The Senate was not amused, but the public loved it. In the years that followed, playwrights composed small comedies about the senator who forgot to leave. He became a kind of gentle punchline in social circles. Eventually, he leaned into the reputation, commissioning a marble bench in the same bathhouse with his name etched into it. Lucius, who slept deeply. Historians are uncertain about which details are real, but the records do note a curious inscription found in the ruins of the baths of Caracalla. Dormitavit hic Varro, sine cura mundi. Here Varro napped, free of the world's cares. Perhaps it is nothing more than legend. But even in legend, there's something comforting in imagining a man who found one corner of Rome where politics could not follow, where heat and quiet washed everything else away. And maybe that's part of the magic of the baths. A place where, even just for a while, one might disappear into calm. Let us drift now into stillness, into the very bones of the bathhouse. You see, the Roman baths weren't just buildings. They were messages carved in marble. They spoke not with words, but with space, temperature, and light. From the dome above to the floor, mosaics beneath your feet, nothing was accidental. To enter a Roman bath was to enter a language of architecture. So as you stand in the vestibule, the sounds of the city fade behind you and you step into a vaulted corridor. The ceiling is often coffered in squares, the niches for clothing are spaced evenly. And then there is the frigidarium, the cold room, almost always constructed with symmetry, twin pools, twin statues, the room itself a square or circle. It is in the caldarium, the hot room, where the architectural secrets deepen. Here the domed ceilings are coated in plaster or mosaics. Many contain small circular vents. And these shafts of light, they were often placed just so that at a certain hour the light would land on a mosaic. And those mosaics, they're not just decoration. Some are literal maps. Others depict bathing scenes. But even the floors had something to say. In a bathhouse in North Africa, the tiles were arranged to form a subtle labyrinth pattern. There are hidden elements too, hollow walls that sing when the air flows just right. Nooks where votive lamps were placed, small bronze pipes shaped like animals, through which warm air hisses gently, and inscriptions, not grand declarations, but quiet dedications.
Now, let us walk slowly through the day, in soft sandals, under sheer linen veils, behind carved parasols held by servants. This time, you are not a worker, nor a clerk, nor a tired man under the floor. You are a noblewoman of Rome. Your name is Alea Livio, and you have never carried your own oil flask. You awake not to labor, but to sin. The chamber you sleep in is draped with fine wool dyed saffron yellow, and your bedding smells faintly of lavender. A handmaid opens the shutters just enough to let in the morning light, but not the full sun. She places a tray of watered wine and fruit at your bedside and speaks no more than needed. Today is your bath day. You rise slowly, stretch your arms above your head, and let your other attendants help you dress in your softest tunic and dyed pure and fine spun. Around your neck hangs a thin gold chain. You wear no rings yet. Not until after. You are not rushed. Nothing in your day is rushed. Your palanquin carries you through the city. The streets are busy, but you are apart from it all. Behind the curtain, you observe the bustle like a shadow slipping past the stage. At the bathhouse, you do not enter with the crowds. You are greeted by a steward and shown to the private wing reserved for the elite, those who donate generously, whose names are carved in marble. Your first stop is not the pool. It is the salon. Here, you are seated, and two women massage your arms with rose oil. Another gently combs your hair long, straight, pinned up by the time you leave. They talk quietly. You mostly listen. One shares a rumor about a senator's wife. Another mentions a new Greek perfume seller in the market. From there, you are led to the tepidurium, where you sit, reclined, on a polished bench, still warm from the morning sun. The room smells of citrus and beeswax. You allow yourself to drift, not quite asleep, not fully alert. There is art on the walls, Venus rising from the foam, dolphins circling her feet. You have seen it 100 times. You never tired of it. When ready, you enter the caldarium. It is hotter, yes, but you are prepared. A servant sprinkles the stone with scented water before you sit. Another fans your face gently with a palm leaf. You are never alone, but no one stares. Eyes remain lowered. In this space, your presence is the command. Your jewelry has been stored. Your fingers are light as birds. Trace the rim of a silver basin. A platter is brought in grapes, almonds, candied fennel seeds. You nibble while someone gently scrapes oil from your shoulders with a... It is warm, soothing, ritualized. After your bath, you are rinsed with cool water from a decorated jug poured in slow streams, then dried with linens warmed over coal. You feel weightless. There! Now come the adornments. Back in the changing chamber, your attendants dress you in a fresh tunic, dyed pale blue and embroidered with fine thread. Earrings are chosen. You glance once into a polished bronze mirror, not for vanity, but precision. One pin adjusted. A curve smooth. By mid-afternoon, you are ready for the rest of your day. You leave the bathhouse the way you came in, quiet ceremony, carried behind a curtain, perfumed, dignified, distant. The city swirls around you, noisy and warm, but you have touched stillness. Later, you may attend a poetry reading, or sip wine in a shaded courtyard, or simply sit near a fountain, listening to the trickle of water against carved stone, letting the rhythm of your day continue unbroken. Because for you, the bath is not just cleansing, it is centering, a pause, a return. And though you will not remember every moment, your body will, the softness of the cloth, the hush of water poured, the quiet recognition that in a world of politics and power, you can still have a moment entirely your.
We remain in the bathhouse now, but the water is not quite so serene. The steam is thick with words. The benches are occupied not by quiet poets or idle patricians, but by Rome's decision-makers. And you, today, are one of them, a mid-ranking official. Not a senator, but close. A man with debts, with favors to call in, and a very precise understanding of how the bathhouse truly works. Because this is no mere retreat. It's your second office, a court without togas, a place where glances hold as much weight as coins. You arrive, as usual, just before the third hour. The guards at the entrance know you. They offer the smallest of nods. You nod back. Inside, the light is golden, the floor is warm, and your mind begins to scan the crowd. Who is here today? Who is not? These absences are noted more carefully than presences. The merchant from Sicilia, yes, he's still trying to gain favor for grain permits. The governor's brother, he's laughing too hard at something, nervous, trying to impress someone. And there, in the far corner, seated as if by chance, is Gaius Calpurnius, whose recent silence at the forum has been the subject of speculation. You sit beside him, not immediately, not directly, but nearby enough for your greetings to reach him, for the conversation to drift naturally toward grain, and then roads, and then, almost by accident, to the appointment to that lucrative provincial position. Nothing is promised, of course, nothing is declared, but words are planted like seeds. Offers are implied, never stated. Commitments are wrapped in pleasantries. This is the art of bathhouse politics. In the tepidarium, a senator and a shipping magnate joke loudly about oysters from Baiae. But beneath the surface, it's about tariffs. You know it. They know you know it. Everyone pretends not to notice. In the frigidarium, while shoulders are doused with cold water and muscles tightened by the chill, another kind of sharpness takes hold. Disputes settled quietly. Warnings issued with a smile. Even the temperature becomes a tool. And the slaves? They hear everything, but speak of nothing. Their silence is part of the architecture. Their presence, unseen but constant, reminds everyone that privacy is an illusion, and discretion is the price of comfort. There is even a phrase you've heard, passed quietly from elder to novice. The Senate debates, the baths decide. Some men rise to power here, wrapped in towels rather than togas. Some fall, too, slowly iced out by being invited later and later, or not at all. You recall one such man, Publius Acelius, once so prominent he had his own personal bench. And now, gone, his absence unspoken, his name rarely mentioned. Such is the temperature of favor. It warms, it cools, and it can vanish. As you move toward the exit, you are handed your sandals, cleaned and warmed. A small nod from the bath steward, a subtle sign that the conversation with Calpurnius was noticed. Noted. You leave refreshed, not just in body, but in strategy. Tomorrow's vote may go your way. If it does, it won't be because of your speech. It will be because of this room, because of the water, because of the way you shared a silence that meant more than words. And this, too, was Rome, not the marble steps of the Forum, but the mosaic tiles beneath your bare feet. We turn now, from politics and performance, to the things they left behind on their skin. Because for all the grandeur of arches and fountains, the Roman bathhouse was, at its heart, a sensory experience. And no sense was more carefully indulged, more painstakingly curated, than smell. Tonight we slow our steps and lean into the fragrant haze, exploring the powders, oils, scrapers, and soaps that turned a simple wash into a ritual. You are standing before a small wooden shelf. On it rest tiny glass jars, blue, green, even violet if the sun hits just right. Each contains something precious, something ancient, something strange. There's no soap. Not really. Not as you know it. Romans preferred strigiling, rubbing scented oil into the skin, then scraping it away with a curved metal blade. The oil lifted the dirt. The strigil took both away. What was left was scent. So what did that oil contain? Sometimes just olive oil, but often much more. The base might be infused with herbs, bay, mint, or myrtle leaves crushed and soaked for days. Sometimes petals, rose, saffron, or violet. Sometimes bark, cinnamon, or the rarer Indian cassia. And then, there were the animal ingredients. A popular bath additive for elite women was musk, derived, gently put, from the scent glands of deer. Or ambergris, a waxy substance from the belly of a whale washed up on distant shores. Highly prized, intoxicating, mysterious. For a cooling effect? Ground chalk or crushed marble, dusted on the skin after rinsing. For exfoliation? A paste of ashes and sand. Some even used finely sifted clay, called terra sigillata, brought from specific islands, said to detoxify the body, said to preserve youth, said to have been once consumed by emperors in small doses. Scented with crushed thyme, it was rubbed on the arms and chest, then rinsed away in the cold plunge. And the perfumes. They came in tiny vials sealed with wax. Oils blended in unguentaria, little ceramic bottles sometimes shaped like animals or columns. Some were made with imported resins like frankincense or myrrh, others with local blooms, lavender from the hills, or rosemary gathered near the coast. One blend, attributed to a famous perfumer named Lamia, was said to contain 12 ingredients, including saffron, cardamom, spikenard, and even a trace of wine. Her signature scent was popular among high-ranking courtesans. Copies of her recipe, scratched in fading Latin, have been found in ruined homes near Pompeii. But scent was more than luxury. It was protection. In a world where illness was believed to travel through miasmas, bad air, rising from swamps or unclean bodies, fragrance became a shield. A way to cloak yourself from unseen threats, to declare, through scent alone, I am clean, I am safe, I belong. Even gladiators used oils. Before combat, they would coat their skin in thick, resinous mixtures that helped prevent injury and muscle strain. Afterward, the mixture, dark with dust and blood, was scraped and sold. Yes, sold. Bottled and sold to fans as a kind of charm, a relic of strength and survival. There is even record of one woman, in a letter, asking her friend in Rome to send 2 small jars of gladiator strigil oil, preferably from Thracian fighters, as my son believes it cures his cough. We cannot say if it worked, but we know it was believed. And belief, in the world of ancient bathing, was everything. So now as you walk quietly back through the misted corridor, imagine those scents, sharp, floral, bitter, sweet, drifting in layers behind you. Traces of time. A cloud of memory wrapped in oil and ash. The Romans didn't just bathe in water, they bathed in intention, in superstition, in scent. Let us walk now through the grandest baths of all, the Thermae Antoninianae, better known as the Baths of Caracalla. Even in ruins, they astonish. Towering brick walls, vast vaulted ceilings, and empty pools large enough to hold hundreds. The echoes linger. You can almost hear the faint slap of sandals on stone, the murmur of conversations, the soft splash of water once poured from silver jugs. But in their prime, they were something else entirely. Commissioned by Emperor Caracalla in the early 3rd century CE, these baths were not built for beauty alone. They were built to impress, to intimidate, and perhaps to distract, because Caracalla, as history remembers him, was not beloved. His reign was marked by suspicion, excess, and the shadow of his brother's blood. He had his brother Gaeta murdered in their mother's arms, an act so shocking that the Senate ordered all images of Gaeta destroyed in what would become one of Rome's most thorough memory-wiping campaigns. And yet, Caracalla built baths, enormous ones. Why? Some say to gain favor with the people. Some say to assert Rome's power. Others whisper it was simply to leave behind something pure, something unbloodied by politics. The baths sprawled across 50 acres. They included a caldarium heated by thousands of slaves working in underground corridors, a massive natatio, an open-air swimming pool, libraries, gyms, gardens, lecture halls, and even art galleries, marble from Egypt, columns from Greece, mosaic tiles from North Africa, statues from Asia Minor. The empire was gathered and laid, piece by piece, into this monument of heat and light. It was said that the caldarium's dome rivaled the Pantheon in size, that the bronze doors gleamed so brightly they could blind a man at noon, that the water flowed so smoothly, bathers wondered if Neptune himself tended the pipes. But even here, where grandeur ruled, rumors lived in the corners. There were whispers that Caracalla's spies moved through the steam, listening, that enemies of the emperor were sometimes found missing their sandals, that secret meetings took place behind certain frescoes, that in one disused corridor, a statue was found with hollow eyes and a slit beneath its base, as if it had once been used to collect something. Coins, notes, names. Of course, none of this can be proven. The grandeur overwhelms the details. What we know is this: for more than 3 centuries, the baths of Caracalla stood as one of the greatest architectural feats in the Roman world. They survived invasions, they survived emperors, but they could not survive time. By the 6th century, the water stopped flowing. The aqueducts, those delicate lifelines of Roman engineering, were cut by invading forces. The hippocausts went cold. The great bronze mirrors tarnished. Plants crept in. And still, people came, not to bathe, but to linger, to marvel, to chip marble from the walls for their own houses, to shelter in the shadow of giants. In the Renaissance, artists explored the ruins by torchlight. Poets described the silence of the halls as louder than war. Michelangelo himself walked among the crumbling columns and dreamed of what once was. And now, when you visit, you'll hear nothing but birdsong, footsteps on gravel, a distant hum of the city beyond. But if you pause, if you stand still, and let the wind shift through a broken archway, you might just imagine the hush of 1,000 conversations, the scent of cedar oil in the air, the low laughter of a boy chasing a dropped towel. Even here, in one of Rome's greatest ruins, the baths remember. Let's now step away from the massive public bathhouses and into something quieter, more personal. Not every Roman bather strode into Caracalla's grand arches. Some preferred a more controlled luxury, a bath experience housed not in civic marble but in private stone, just steps from their own bedrooms. Tonight, you are walking the shaded corridor of a wealthy villa just beyond the city walls. Cypress trees line the garden outside. A fountain gurgles softly nearby, fed by a discreet aqueduct that serves only this household. You enter through a modest wooden door and descend 2 shallow steps. The air cools. You are in the balneum, the private bathhouse of the Roman elite. It is smaller, of course, no vast swimming pool, no bustling crowd, but it is no less refined. In fact, it may be more elegant. The walls are painted a soft ochre with delicate frescoes, birds perched on vines, garlands tied with ribbons, and small mythological scenes, Cupid washing his face, Venus drying her hair. There are just 3 rooms here: a tepidarium, a caldarium, and a small frigidarium. The family icy steward lights the braziers early in the morning so the water and floors are warm by midday. The stone has been waxed to a faint shine, and the scent of pine resin lingers in the corners. This bathhouse is not for spectacle. It is for routine, for retreat. The lady of the house comes here before her afternoon meal. Her husband in the evenings, sometimes after a long day of managing estates or entertaining guests. Their grown children use it less, preferring the social bustle of the city's therme. But the balneum is the domain of the household. Slaves maintain it. Cooks send in trays of figs and cheese on hot afternoons. A favored cat often curls up on the warm ledge near the caldarium, where the sun slants in just so. There are no politics here, no grand declarations or gossip-laced banter. The sounds are softer, water pouring, cloths being wrung out, sandals set neatly beside the door. Even the strigils are simpler, made of brass or bone, inscribed only with initials. But don't be fooled by the modesty. This quiet bathhouse represents immense privilege. To have hot water on demand, to control who enters, to bathe in privacy, without the judgment or spectacle of the city. That is wealth. That is power. Outside, the world turns. Rome debates its next conquest. Markets swell and shrink. Messengers gallop down the Via Appia. But inside this villa, the rhythm is unchanged. A small jug of scented oil is warmed gently beside the brazier. A child's towel, forgotten, lies folded near the pool's edge. A bronze comb, gifted to the lady of the house on her marriage day, rests on a polished shelf. These are not the great baths of the empire, but in many ways they speak more intimately to the Roman soul. They are baths made not to impress, but to belong, to soothe, to preserve. And as the day fades, and the last candle flickers beside the basin, you begin to understand. This was their stillness. Not loud, not vast, but complete. Now we ease into an older, quieter question, one that lingers beneath the stones and scents and sweat. What if bathing was never just physical? In ancient Rome, cleanliness had another layer, a spiritual one, a subtle but ever-present undercurrent of belief that to bathe was also to realign the body and soul, to prepare oneself, not just for public life, but for sacred observance. You see it in the architecture, in the placement of shrines near bath entrances. You hear it in the prayers muttered before a cold plunge. You feel it in the hush that sometimes settled over a room, as if the space itself demanded reverence. Imagine yourself now, not as a bather concerned with oil and comfort, but as someone preparing for ritual. Perhaps you're a young initiate about to take part in a religious ceremony, one of the many mystery cults that thrived alongside the traditional Roman gods. Before you are allowed to participate, you must purify yourself, not symbolically, literally. You've been fasting for days. You are tired but focused. You are led to a quiet balneum at dusk. The walls are lit with soft torchlight. The water has been drawn but untouched. You remove your garments. No jewelry, no scent. You step into the pool, alone, slowly. You're not here to socialize. You're not here to be seen. You're here to be cleansed. The water closes around your chest. It is colder than expected. You feel every movement of it, how it clings, how it resists. You wash not with strigil or soap but with your hands, 3 times over your head, 3 times across your chest. You recite the prescribed words, quietly. It's not about hygiene, it's about readiness. Even in the more public therme, these quiet acts endured. Some bathers traced the sign of their household deity into the steam before entering. Others dropped a small coin, always bronze, into the fountain beside the apoditerium before beginning their routine. Not for luck, they said, for balance. Some baths even had small shrines within them, little niches tucked into the wall, dedicated to Fortuna or Salus, the goddess of health. In Ostia, archaeologists discovered a votive altar to Hygeia, the Greek goddess of cleanliness and wellness, placed beside a marble basin. Someone once lit candles here, left offerings, tiny garlands made of dried herbs, barely more than dust now. And of course there were the healing baths, thermae sacrae, baths fed by mineral springs, believed to be touched by the gods. People traveled for days to reach them, not for pleasure, but for healing. They brought illness, injury, grief. They soaked in silence. They left with hope. Roman physicians often prescribed such visits, not only to soothe the body, but to balance the humors, the inner energies that govern the soul. A warm bath for melancholy, a cold plunge for fevered temper, a scented oil for restlessness. There is even record of one woman, a matron from Hispania, who visited a spring-fed bath every new moon to honor the passing of her daughter. She bathed in silence, alone, then sat by the fountain and spoke aloud, as if to someone just beyond the steam. She did this every month, for 20 years. So when we imagine the baths as only places of laughter, luxury, or indulgence, we miss their deeper rhythm. For some, they were a passage, a veil, a place to wash not just the body, but the sorrow, the fear, the anticipation. Even today in their ruins, people fall silent when they enter, not because they are told to, but because something in the air still holds reverence, still remembers. You can almost hear it if you breathe slowly enough. That soft exhale between the splash and the stillness. Let us linger now, not in the water, but beside it. Reclined, draped in linen, a silver goblet resting loosely in your hand. Because though the Roman baths were places of cleansing, they were also places of appetite, not just for gossip or warmth, but for food, for wine, for soft cushions, dozing friends, and roasted almonds passed from hand to hand. Tonight, you're not just here to soak. You've been invited to a convivium, a private bathhouse banquet, held by a wealthy patron in the quiet hours just before dusk. Not quite a party, not quite a feast. Something slower, louder in laughter perhaps, softer in formality. You arrived early, bathed, oiled, and now find yourself reclined along the edge of a small tepidarium reserved for honored guests. The tiles beneath your elbow are warm. You sip gently, watered wine with a trace of cinnamon and honey. The air is humid, tinged with lemon leaf. You hear slow flute music from a nearby room, the tones echoing gently through the corridor. A slave places a dish of olives before you, glossy with oil. You take one without thought. The rhythm is slow, indulgent, practiced. The host moves through the crowd, greeting each guest with a nod, sometimes a touch to the shoulder. He is barefoot in a dyed wool tunic and wears a thin gold circlet, just enough to remind everyone of his rank without spoiling the comfort of the evening. More food arrives, slices of fresh bread, a pâté of crushed dates and figs, roasted chickpeas with garlic, small fish, lightly salted, served in shallow clay bowls. Nothing heavy. All meant to be eaten slowly, with fingers or tiny two-pronged forks of bone. There is no seating arrangement here, no hierarchy. Guests lounge where they will. Some are damp from the baths, others dressed for the evening. An elderly poet leans against a warm wall, reciting a verse so quietly only the woman next to him seems to hear it. In the next room, the laconicum, the dry sweat chamber, a group of younger men laugh too loudly. Someone spills a little wine. A servant arrives instantly, towels in hand, never speaking. The sound of dripping water somewhere in the distance blends with the soft hum of voices. The bathing, the dining, it blends. One slides into the next. It is not uncommon for guests to step briefly back into the caldarium between courses, to warm the skin, then return to their spot beside the table for another bite. In this space, time folds. A single evening might feel like a season. Hours drift. Jokes stretch lazily across the room like vines. Even the silences are rich. And at the end, when bellies are full and fingers sticky with honey, and the goblets have been drained one last time, someone might sing, not a performance, a low rhythmic chant from childhood, or a tune from the countryside, or a poem put to melody just for tonight. It echoes in the warm stone like a secret. As you rise to leave, a servant wraps you in a dry cloth. Another places a fresh garland in your hands, bay leaves, rosemary, and one small sprig of lavender. You do not speak much on your way out. No one does. The hush of comfort sits heavy in the chest. The heat of the evening still lingers on your skin. And tomorrow, when the city grows loud again, you will remember this. The glow of lamplight on wet stone, the scent of sweet wine, and the way conversation, food, and steam could fold into one long, sighing moment, where nothing else quite mattered. Let us return now, to the quiet footsteps in the background, the ones that carried trays and scrubbed walls, that stirred fires and replaced towels, without praise, without pause. In the grand theater of the Roman bathhouse, there was always an invisible cast, the slaves, and tonight, we follow one of them. You are called Tiro. Your name means something like new boy, though you're not new anymore. You were purchased 5 years ago, trained in the baths at age 15, and have been here ever since. Your day begins in darkness, not silence, never silence. Even before sunrise, there are sounds. Braziers creak, water drips somewhere from a pipe that always leaks. An older slave, Felix, is already stoking the first fire of the hypocaust, face lined with ash and memory. Your task is the vestiarium, the changing rooms. It is your job to fold togas, hundreds of them. Some are clean, most are damp, some reek of perfume, others of vinegar and mold. And some contain secrets, coins tucked in hems, love notes scrawled hastily and stuffed into a sandal. You are not supposed to look. But of course, you do. Later you carry oil jars from the storeroom. They're heavy. The handles dig into your hands. You are careful not to drop one. Each is worth more than your monthly ration. You pour into smaller flasks. No spills, no smudges. The overseer watches from the shadows. You clean the strigils too, lined up neatly on a wooden rack. The bronze ones are for senators, the horn ones for common folk. You polish each until it shines. By mid-morning, the bathhouse comes alive. The rich arrive in litters. The poor arrive barefoot. You watch them as they enter. Note the tilt of their heads, the clink of jewelry, the length of their stay. You know who tips. You know who doesn't. One matron demands warmed oil, always cinnamon. One retired centurion always complains the frigidarium is too cold. One poet insists on quoting Virgil while you scrub his feet. You nod at the right moments. You smile. You listen. You do not speak unless invited. It is tiring. Not just the work, but the listening, the pretending, the endurance of being needed but never seen. In the late afternoon, when the floors are slick with footprints and your arms ache from carrying wet cloths, you get a moment. Just one. A cup of watered wine. A corner of bread with crushed garlic. You sit by the furnace for a few minutes, letting the warmth seep into your bones. You do not resent the bathers. Not exactly. This is your life. And strangely, the bathhouse has become a kind of home. You know every crack in the wall, every creak in the doorframe, every loose tile in the mosaic lion that greets guests at the entrance. Sometimes you hum to yourself while you sweep. A song your mother sang. You're not sure if you remember the words correctly anymore, but the tune carries. There is kindness sometimes. A young patrician once handed you a small loaf and whispered, "For the good oil, not the cheap one." You still remember her name. You always will. And when the last bather leaves, when the fire gutters low, when the lamps are snuffed one by one, you mop the floor. You press your palm to the still warm bench. You whisper goodnight to the space, not because it will hear you, but because you've earned the right to speak here, even if softly. Then you curl up on your blanket in the storeroom, a stack of towels for a pillow, and you sleep. The bathhouse dreams above you, and in the rhythm of its breathing stone, your life continues. Now we shift to the slow unraveling, the quiet undoing of what once seemed eternal. For centuries, Roman baths pulsed with warmth and laughter. They were woven into the very rhythm of daily life, rituals as constant as sunrise. But even marble wears down. Even aqueducts run dry. Let's walk together slowly into the twilight of the Roman bathing age. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment when the doors were locked, the pools drained, the fires extinguished. It was a slow dimming. A candle flickering down, each breath of wind another small change. In the 3rd and 4th centuries, Rome's borders began to contract. Trade became riskier. Luxuries like cinnamon oil or North African limestone grew harder to obtain. Taxes climbed. Public funds shrank. And slowly, the great thermae, those palaces of steam, began to age. At first, the decline was subtle. A missing tile here, a collapsed ceiling fresco left unrepaired, a colder caldarium than usual. Patrons grumbled, but still came. But as the empire fractured, so did its infrastructure. Rome's famed aqueducts, those silent, graceful highways of water, were vulnerable. They stretched for miles, often undefended, threading through countryside now dotted with unrest and invasion. In 537 CE, during the Gothic War, the Ostrogoths besieged Rome and deliberately severed the aqueducts. The city's fountains went dry. Its baths fell silent. It is said that the baths of Caracalla continued in some diminished form for a time, heated by makeshift fires, water carried by hand. But they were never the same. Without the pulse of flowing water, they became shells, ornate, hollow. The people adapted. Some still bathed in rivers. Others built smaller private baths, less grandeur, more utility. In rural villas, the balneum lived on, though more as a memory than a ritual. And attitudes changed. By the 6th century, with the rise of Christianity, public bathing began to lose its social prestige. Church leaders grew uneasy about communal nudity, about the mingling of men and women, about the luxuries and vanities so often associated with the baths. Not all opposed them, but many advised modesty. Cleanliness was still encouraged, but spiritual purity now overshadowed physical ritual. Some bathhouses were converted, turned into churches, monasteries, even grain storage facilities. Others were stripped of their marble, their bronze melted down for bells or weapons, their mosaics lost beneath layers of earth and silence. And yet, they lingered. Travelers passing through Rome centuries later still described the ruins in awe. The poet Petrarch, writing in the 14th century, marveled at the scale of Caracalla's baths, even in decay. What strength built this? What patience carved these halls, and yet the weeds now rule it all. In their silence, the baths remained teachers. They showed what it meant to build with care, to cherish routine, to wrap beauty around something as simple as washing the skin. They reminded later generations that civilization is not only politics or war, but rhythm, ritual, shared water. And in some corners of Europe and the Middle East, echoes survived. The hammams of the Islamic world, the bathhouses of Byzantium, the public pools of Spain, all carried forward fragments of Rome's bathing soul, altered, adapted, but alive. So now, when we walk through the ruins, when we see a cracked dome open to the sky, or a drained pool filled with moss, we are not just looking at stone. We are seeing the fading breath of a ritual, and in that stillness, something persists. Not heat, not scent, but memory. A ghost of steam rising once more, if only in the mind. Let us shift our focus now, to smaller feet and smaller voices. The Roman baths were not reserved for senators and poets alone. Children, those sticky-handed barefoot echoes of the adult world, were very much a part of bathhouse life. Their presence may not fill the statues or inscriptions, but their laughter once rang against the tiles just the same. Imagine now that you are a Roman child, 7 years old, perhaps 8. The world is big, hot, and slippery, and your mother has taken you to the thermi after market. You're not particularly clean. You've got bits of bread crust on your tunic, fig stains on your hands. Your sandals are too loose. One of them flaps louder than the other. But the moment you enter the bathhouse, everything changes. The warm stone floor, the echo, the smell of oil and lime wash. You tug at your mother's hand, eager to run ahead. She gives you that look, but doesn't stop you. You know where to go. You always do. The natatio, the swimming pool, is your ocean. The place where older boys show off their dives, where younger ones paddle furiously, splashing too much. You leap in with a shriek. The water is cool, bracing, and wonderful. You forget your fig stains immediately. Nearby, girls sit in shallower pools, braiding each other's hair and whispering. One holds a clay doll. Another has a reed flute and plays 3 notes over and over again until someone throws a fig at her. Older children challenge each other to splash battles, to races across the bath floor, to who can hold their breath longest in the frigidarium. There's always a boy who pretends to be a dolphin, and always someone who slips and pretends they didn't cry. Attendants scold gently. Towels are fetched. Bruised knees are ignored. The marble is never quite safe, but it doesn't matter. Children have no fear of slipping. But there is structure too. Some bathhouses offered lessons, little corners where tutors waited, scrolls in hand for wealthier children to practice recitation. A clever compromise. Study your letters first, then you may swim. Memorize your Virgil, and you may have sweet wine afterward. And sometimes, older bathers would call over a child, ruffle their hair, and offer a honey cake if they could recite a proverb. Something like, "Clean water and a clear mind go hand in hand." You might not understand what it meant, but the honey cake tasted good, so you remembered it anyway. Children learned in the baths, not just about hygiene, but about order, respect, community. You watched how your elders moved, how they poured water from high to low, how they spoke, or didn't speak, in the presence of senators, how they folded their garments. You learned that silence was sometimes power, that the man who shouted usually lost his towel. And you learned about kindness too. The elderly man who always brought extra oil for those who forgot. The girl who helped a younger one up from a fall. The slave who whispered a joke to make you laugh when your mother scolded you for splashing too loudly. At the end of your visit you were dried, somewhat roughly with a coarse linen cloth. Your curls were patted down, your sandals buckled, and you were told to say thank you, even if you didn't want to leave. You returned home drowsy, warm, and sticky again, this time with oil instead of fig jam. But you would remember it. Not the mosaics, not the architecture, but the feeling of your limbs loosened by heat, of laughter echoing in stone, of being seen even for just a moment as part of something bigger. The baths weren't just for grown-ups. They were schools of water, of rhythm, of memory. And in the quiet corners, still today, you can almost hear the giggle that slipped past the scolding, the splash that missed its mark, and the small voice proudly reciting, "A clean face means good fortune." Now let us pause, to appreciate not the marble or mosaics, but the miracle beneath it all. Because behind the luxury of Roman baths was something more impressive than scent, sculpture, or ceremony. Something invisible, yet entirely essential. Water. More specifically, water delivered on demand, controlled, heated, recycled, supplied not to dozens or even hundreds, but to millions. To understand the baths, we must understand the water that made them possible. And to understand that, we walk not through the tepidarium, but along the arches of Rome's greatest triumph, the aqueductus. Imagine yourself walking beside one now. It stretches across the horizon, tiered stone arches, silent and graceful. It doesn't boast, it carries, gently, reliably, day after day. Rome had 11 major aqueducts by the end of the 3rd century CE. Each one pulled water from springs and rivers miles beyond the city walls. Some ran over mountains, some tunneled through hills, some crossed valleys on bridges that still stand today. And all of them flowed by gravity. No pumps, just gradient. The incline was so precise, less than 1 foot per 100 feet of stone, that modern engineers still marvel at it. The water was guided into distribution tanks called castella, which then fed neighborhoods, fountains, latrines, and, of course, baths. Each major bathhouse had its own connection to the network. The baths of Diocletian, for instance, were fed by the Aqua Marcia, its water reputed to be among the coldest and clearest in the empire. Once inside, the water split. Cold tanks, warm tanks, hot tanks. Heated in great bronze cauldrons. Channeled through lead or terracotta pipes. Flow controlled by bronze valves operated by skilled workers, many of whom could tell temperature by the sound the water made rushing through. Water. The flow had to be perfect. Too slow, and the pools would cool. Too fast, and the pressure could crack the tiles. In some cases, used water from the baths was piped directly into public latrines, a form of early recycling. Rome did not just bathe for beauty, it bathed with systems. Maintenance crews were employed to clear silt from channels, remove algae, and repair cracks. The curatores aquarum, Rome's water commissioners, kept logs and reports on leaks, theft, and usage. Penalties for tapping into the aqueduct illegally were steep. There are even surviving inscriptions warning, "This water is not for private use. Let it flow for all, as decreed by the Senate. Because water was not just a convenience, it was a right, a symbol of Rome's strength and care. To provide hot water daily to the poor as well as the patrician was no accident. It was a message. You live in the empire, and the empire remembers you. And perhaps that is the most impressive part of all, not the scale of the aqueducts, not the beauty of the baths, but the simple promise they made and kept, that every day clean water would arrive, that every day someone could be soothed, that in the heat of the city, there would always be a place to rest. Even now, if you walk the old paths of Aqua Claudia or follow the broken curves of Aqua Virgo into the heart of modern Rome, you can still hear the whisper of that flow, quiet, constant, certain. The empire may have fallen, but the water still remembers. As we near the end of our journey through Rome's steamy sanctuaries, let us pause once more. Not for the architects or emperors or poets, but for the ones who stood at the edge of the steam, waiting with towels in hand. We return to the workers, not the furnace tenders this time, but those who dealt directly with the human body. The bathhouse attendants. You might imagine them as quiet figures in the background, dull, routine, invisible, but in truth these men, often enslaved, sometimes freedmen, were the bathhouse's heartbeat. They touched every life that passed through its doors. Quite literally. Imagine you are one. Your title depends on your specialty. If you apply oil, you are an unctuarius. If you give massages, you're a tractator. If you scrape and polish, you're a strigillator. If you help wealthy patrons dress or undress, you're a capsarius. Each has its own tools, its own routine. Your hands are strong, not from labor, but from repetition. You've massaged the same senator every week for 3 years. You know the knot in his shoulder better than he does. You know he likes the oil warmed, not hot. That he dislikes the smell of rosemary. That he never ever tips. Some bathers treat you with kindness. A nod. A soft word. Maybe even a coin or two slipped discreetly. Others ignore you entirely. They don't even feel it when you kneel before them. But you see everything. You see their bruises, their scars. You know who is aging, who is drinking too much, who whispers, who watches, who weeps when they think no one sees. Sometimes you hear things, a slip of gossip, a plan, a confession. You store them away, silently. The job is physical, yes, but also theatrical. You learn to read the room, to appear when needed and vanish when not. Your presence must be felt but not noticed. Your movements precise, predictable. In the larger bathhouses, a sort of hierarchy forms. The best tractatories are requested by name. Some even receive small gifts from their clients. A belt, a new tunic, a ring slipped into a coin pouch. A few have even bought their freedom this way, amassing tiny fortunes one oil jar at a time. And then there are the muscle men. These aren't just masseurs. They're performers. Their job? To impress. To embody strength and discipline. To walk through the tepidarium oiled and gleaming, displaying the results of Roman hygiene and training. Not gladiators, but almost. A living ad for the benefits of regular bathing, wrestling, and massage. Some patrons, especially older ones, hired these men not for service but for display. A kind of human ornament, a status symbol. They might stand silently by the bench, arms folded, or demonstrate wrestling holds in the palastra before dinner. Their beauty was labor, carefully curated. Their silence was part of the performance. Even the strigils they used were decorative, engraved, polished, and often personalized with their client's name. The scraping was methodical, gentle, reassuring, and beneath it all, a kind of intimacy grew. Not romantic, not necessarily even emotional, but physical closeness, day after day, year after year. Imagine scraping the back of the same man every Thursday for a decade. Imagine knowing the exact angle his shoulder slumps after bad news. Imagine being the last touch he feels before a battle, a journey, or death. You are not his equal, but you are his mirror, and when he dies, perhaps you are given one of his rings, or a coin, pressed into your palm without ceremony, or nothing at all, only the quiet spot where he used to sit. And so the work continues. The oil is warmed, the cloths are folded, the steam curls up around your shoulders. You take the next strigil in hand and begin again. We have seen the heat, the rituals, the gossip and grandeur. But now, we step into stillness. Because even Rome's greatest bathhouses had to sleep. There is something haunting about a place built for bodies and voices that suddenly falls quiet. When the doors close and the last sandal echoes out onto the street, the steam cools, the floors dry, and a different rhythm takes over. You are the night watchman. You're not a soldier. Not exactly. You carry a cudgel more out of formality than fear. Most troublemakers don't linger where heat once ruled. You arrive just after sunset. The day staff have gone. The last laundry boys have finished their folding. The final basin has been scrubbed with vinegar and sand. The lamps are burning low and you move from room to room, checking that each one is safe. The air still smells faintly of citrus and ash. Not strong, but there, clinging to the stone like memory. In the apoditerium, abandoned sandals sit in pairs, left by a careless child. You gather them quietly, placing them in a basket to be claimed, if anyone remembers. In the caldarium, water rests in the basin like a dark mirror. You hear the gentle drip from a cracked spout, one that leaks only at night. The echo is slow, patient. In the tepidarium, the air is still warm. You sit there sometimes, on a stone bench that's lost most of its heat. You like the way sound doesn't quite carry here. You've read graffiti scratched into the walls by candlelight, some crass, some poetic. Flavia was here. He who bathes in silence leaves his sins behind. And in the frigidarium, your steps are loud. The cold carries them farther. You light a lamp just to see the floor better, watching for puddles, loose tiles. Everything seems larger at night. The ceilings higher, the shadows deeper. Sometimes you talk to yourself. Not words. Just soft hums, like the ones your mother sang long ago. The stone doesn't mind. It listens without judgment. You pause at the castellum, the cistern. You check the level, though there's no need. The water will be refilled at dawn. You run your fingers along the edge of the bronze valve, feeling the faint vibration where water still trickles in. Even in sleep, the bath breathes. There are rumors, of course, that ghosts walk the hippocaust, that old bathers return, dripping wet, asking for their sandals. That one attendant still finishes his cleaning years after his death. You don't believe them, not really, but you greet the statues anyway. You nod to the mosaic dolphin in the corner alcove. You leave a few drops of wine near the old Mercury shrine just in case. When your shift ends, you do not wake the bath. You do not raise the lamps. You leave it wrapped in its own warmth, soft and silent. Outside, the sky is pale with morning. You hear carts beginning their rattle down the road. The city stirs. Soon the doors will open. Voices will rise. Heat will return. But for now, just before the light changes, the bathhouse belongs to you. Not in grandeur, not in name, but in silence. And in the silence, you hear it all. The dripping, the breathing, the hush that holds centuries in its arms. And now, the last coals have cooled. The last echo has drifted upward to the dome. The bathhouse sleeps once more. You've journeyed through 20 rooms of sound and silence, through the grime of the furnace floor and the gleam of marble benches. You've heard gossip swirl in steam, seen mosaics tell quiet jokes, and followed footsteps through 1,000 different lives, each one marked not by battles or dates, but by something much more familiar. Heat, water, routine. It's easy to think of the Roman baths as symbols of decadence or power, but underneath all the luxury was something softer, something human. A need to pause, to rinse away the day, to feel, even briefly, untouched by the weight of the world. Even now the ruins remember. A chipped mosaic lion still guards the edge of a long empty pool. A broken strigil lies in a museum drawer, its curve worn smooth by hands long gone. In some quiet city corner, beneath layers of pavement and dust, water still flows through ancient stone, searching always for the path it used to know. And here, in the calm of this moment, you are connected to it, to the silence, to the rhythm, to the warmth that once held an empire still. Let it hold you now. You don't need to recall every name, every chamber, every scent. You only need to rest, to know that even the grandest empires made time to soak, to breathe, to soften. And in doing so, so can you. So close your eyes if they're not already closed. Let the last steam rise and vanish into the quiet. Tomorrow will come, but for now there is only warmth, only stillness, only sleep. Good night.